I'm Ben, and I'm just going to be asking you a few questions on your experiences in Libya and Syria and so on. So it shouldn't take up too much of your time. I'm looking for a few interesting answers. I'm sure you've got many interesting things to tell me.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Firstly, I'd like to start off with saying that you were obviously held in appalling conditions in Libya's Abu Salim prison and various others. How did your experiences in captivity sort of influence your decision to join the Libyan freedom fighters and carry on your important work in the region?
Well, it wasn't so much my experience in the prison as seeing the result of what we achieved in Libya in the war. You know, and Libyans are happy, they're optimistic for their future. They were very active in their elections, and I want Syrians to have that result in those opportunities as well.
Of course, yes, we all do. I think that's a very good reason to fight alongside these forces. And regarding these freedom fighters, of course, you've been to both Libya and Syria in that order, and obviously had a lot of contact with the forces there. And from your experience, as a general consensus among the forces, what do they believe in as a whole? Their core beliefs, ideals, and so on.
Virtually every fighter I spoke to wanted to fight for democracy. They want Syria to be a democratic country when the war is over. They want to live in peace with their neighbors and with minorities within their own country. It really is as simple as that.
Yeah, of course, yes. As I say, unfortunately, we've heard a lot of bad press from the alternative media outlets, as they call themselves, about the fighters. But I think, as most of us know, they genuinely want freedom, democracy, and national self-determination.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we've heard a lot of, as I say, we've heard a lot of hype in mainstream and alternative media outlets about foreign and Islamist fighters having allegedly some influence and a presence within both the revolutionary forces of both countries. From your perspective, from your time there, if you encountered any, how much of a presence do you think they actually have, and how much influence either do they wield or did they wield in the rebel forces?
In Libya, I met one other foreign fighter besides myself, an Egyptian. He wasn't a leader; he was just an infantryman, and he did not appear to be an Islamist. In Syria, I met one foreign fighter who was from France, not of North African descent, I believe, who had come to Syria to fight. That was all. The vast majority of fighters in Syria are Syrian.
Of course, yes. As I say, I've received some quite inaccurate reports saying that in Aleppo, half the fighters are foreign, and there's been a lot of nonsense to that effect. But I had a feeling that wasn't the case.
No, that's absolutely not the case. I spent a month in Aleppo. Like I said, I met one fighter that I can verify as being foreign, and he wasn't actually fighting when I met him either.
It must have been quite a breathtaking and often frightening series of changes. I know it must have been. What was sort of going through your mind as you went through such a dramatic period of time? It must have been overwhelming.
Well, I left journalism behind in 2010, and in that year I only wrote one article. When I went to Libya, I went with the intention of fighting, if that was going to be possible, or if not, supporting the revolution in any way I could. When I was captured on a recon mission with weapons. So, I mean, I went there. I was a fighter before prison, and I was a fighter after prison. It's something I believe in. I'm there to affect actions on the ground, not to document them.
But as I say, that's the way to go. If everyone around the world can unite in such a fight for freedom, then I think the world would be a much better place.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, these are universal ideals that we're fighting for in these countries. It's also important because Syria is much larger than Syria. What happens in Syria will set an example. People are watching in other countries who want to overthrow authoritarian regimes in their country as well. They're watching how Syria plays out, and the success of Syria will inspire them to also rise up.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen some inspiration from Syria go to country, people fighting for freedom into countries such as Iran and in the Qatif province of Saudi Arabia and other such places. If another such war for freedom and national self-determination erupted there, do you think you'd also go there to either fight or document their struggle?
I'll probably be active in these revolutions for the foreseeable future. In what capacity, I don't know. In Syria, I may very well be fighting in the future. Beyond that, the Syrian revolution could take years. I can't really predict what could happen after that, but I'll be active in some capacity.
Yeah, exactly. As I say, a revolution isn't just an arms ring. I do believe it's a series of long-term political changes too that aren't just going to take a few weeks after in a post-Assad Syria. I think that they'll take time. So I think it will take a lot of long-term involvement from everyone involved to bring Syria through.
Mm-hmm. Well, the war itself, even for the regime to topple, could still take years.
Yeah. So I was there's what one source in Aleppo posted on The Guardian. He said that he believes that his city, because he lives there, is going to take years to recover from as it is. Even after the regime may fall. So do you think that this is a valid interpretation from?
Yes. Aleppo will take a considerable amount of more time to liberate. I hope it'll be liberated in 2013. But it's going to take several months. The pace of the war is very slow there. A lot of the city is destroyed. Beyond that, a lot of the city will probably remain vacant for years, and people who do return may be involved in conflicts between each other, much as occurred in cities like Beirut during the Lebanon civil war.
Oh, of course, yes, because we have to take into account the fact that Assad's been deliberately stoking sectarian tensions as a policy of divide and conquer, so it makes sense that neighbours are going to have to reconcile and the city will have to recover socially as well as through reconstruction.
Right, it's a problem that the longer the war continues, the greater a problem it'll be.
Exactly, and again, linking back to the media have been saying how we've been hearing a lot of hype about how Aleppo is essentially surrounded by the FSA and that the government fighters are being slowly forced back. From your time there, how would you say this is the case, or would you say that it's more of a Stalingrad-like stalemate, as some people have been reporting too?
At this point, it's largely a stalemate. The city's 50-50. It'll take a long time to liberate the city. The pace of the war is quite slow. The front lines don't really change all that much within the city. There's also terrain issues. The area is pretty well covered by Assad snipers. There's also artillery strikes, hits from the air. It's hard to gain ground in Aleppo. And it's going to take quite a bit of time. Also in the wealthy neighborhoods, there's wide open spaces that they have to cross that are covered by snipers, whereas in areas that the FSA is currently in, it's possible to bust holes in walls of houses and move within houses to avoid snipers. So right now, both sides the front lines may not change for months or may change in little ways. But it's going to take something special to really get a push going to be able to liberate the city.
As I say, I have heard that the city is pretty much divided 50-50 with a fluid front line that often doesn't really change. So I think that does confirm largely what I've been hearing. But regarding Libya again, what was the initial reaction of the Ras Aluf brigade commander when you requested to join the National Liberation Forces? Because I expect, from my perspective, it must have been much of a surprise to them that a non-Libyan Western foreigner was offering his service as a fighter to them.
Well, when I first joined the revolution, it was actually before brigades had even formed. It was before NATO got involved. Then it was very easy to operate as an undercover American. Within the Libyan revolution, people did not know I was American. After prison, when I returned and I went to join a brigade, fortunately I have this actually captured on film. One of my friends filmed it when I approached the commander. The reaction was welcome. I had a lot of street credibility after serving time in a Bousseline prison. So because of that, it was very easy for me to reintegrate into the rebel forces.
Brilliant. As I say, it shows a brilliant sense of solidarity that they're willing to accept anyone into their cause who believes in the fight for freedom. It's heartening, I believe. I think it's a brilliant sign.
Yeah, well, I don't know at that point how much they were willing to accept anybody, but they, my experience in the prison had definitely made it clear that I was one of them, and they accepted me. And when I went to Syria also, they knew that I had fought in Libya. My reputation sort of preceded me thanks to the internet and people talking on the street. So there are also some Katiba commanders offered to have me join their brigade. They approached me. But at this time, I'm not joining any Katibas.
It was mentioned on The Guardian that you were in Aleppo and you were making a documentary there and also giving advice to the Syrian Free Army. How has said work in Aleppo gone? Have you managed to get some footage and reports and so on since your time there?
I got incredible footage, mostly in the form of interviews. The film I'm making, I've managed to capture the hopes and aspirations of the Syrian people as told by 4 or 5 different characters. It'll be a short film. I'm quite pleased with the result. It was very difficult to film. I've put my own money into it because funding that I was promised never came through. Hopefully I can recover some of these costs at some point. And yes, I was also advising the rebels based on my educational background and my experience in Libya. I would advise the doctor at Dar Shifa Hospital when some journalists who were friends of mine were raising money for it. They didn't want the ambulance. I told them, look, disguise the ambulances, and then they won't be hit by regime planes. Then they wanted the ambulance. I read today that now they're disguising all their ambulances in Aleppo, as I recommended. So, we're accomplishing things there. I hope that the film will accomplish a lot. I'm very pleased with the characters that I managed to find. They're very inspiring people, and I hope to have the film released within the next couple months.
Brilliant. Is there any indication as to when the film will be released? Will it be soon in the next few months, or will it be maybe later on towards mid-2013?
Well, the film is intended to improve the international image, help with recruitment, help with donations going to the SA. So the sooner I release it, the better. Right now, my only holdup is finding an editor and finding a way for funding to get an editor. But other than that, the film's probably going to be a 15 to 20 minute short, designed for the maximum emotional impact I can get in that time. The sooner is better. I'm ready to get it released as soon as possible. It's not going to take the long time that most films take. I'm not making a documentary to enter into a lot of film festivals or that's a for-profit documentary. I did this film. It's an activist film. I did it with the intention of releasing it quickly, and I did it so far at my own expense. So sooner is better.
Brilliant. Going back to your first capture in Libya, I hear that when you were interrogated by Gaddafi's police, you were told you would never see America again and other such threatening things. What were your first reactions and feelings upon being told such terrifying things and being in such a dangerous, potentially life-threatening situation with these horrible people?
Well, it felt like my heart had been ripped out. At the same time, I wasn't that surprised. I was captured on a recon mission with a truck with weapons. I had some film footage for me that I still have some copies of, some of that footage that showed that I was a rebel fighter, declaring my support for the revolution. It was a very bad situation for me. I was interrogated by Gaddafi's army after they captured us. I was blindfolded during the interrogation. They said that they thought I was CIA or Mossad, and that I said, well, I've been treated well so far, and when I get back to America, that's what I'll tell people. And their reply was, you will never see America again. And then they threw me back in the cell, and then I essentially disappeared from the world for nearly 6 months as the regime told the international press that they did not have me. They want everybody to think I was dead. And fortunately, the rebels made progress into Tripoli, and prisoners helped me escape, and we escaped from the prison. But otherwise, if the war had gone the other way, I was captured before NATO got involved. I didn't know NATO was involved until after I escaped from prison. So I thought for quite a while in prison that I'd be there for 20 or 30 years.
As I say, yes, you were apparently held in Maktab al-Nasser prison in Abu Salim district with little lighting and in solitary confinement. And 85 days later, transported to Abu Salim itself and spent 81 days in solitary confinement, which was apparently made worse by OCD. What was your first reaction upon being freed from this dreadful place and finding that you had some freedom and self-determination again?
It was the best day of my life. I sort of worried, what if it's not real? That day was the first day I found out that NATO would become involved in the war. That was the first day when I went to somebody's house. It was a safe house right after escaping prison. And they put on television, and I saw the Syrian revolution had started. The Syrian revolution had started the day after I was captured in Libya. So that was the first time I found out about that as well. It was that night I was sitting at somebody's house watching my own story on CNN with my mother and my girlfriend talking on CNN about me escaping prison that day. and then I was watching it on CNN.
I hear you had some friends in the Libyan rebel army that were also captured, and you reportedly refused to leave the country until they and other prisoners of war had their freedom as well. So did you feel was that an issue you felt very strongly about? You wanted to ensure that they were free before you.
Yes, I wasn't. I certainly wasn't going to leave anybody behind. Not the men I was captured with, and not any other prisoners. When I came to Libya, I made a commitment to the men. I said I will not leave Libya until Libya is free. And I meant that. I was raised to honor my commitments. There was no way I was going to leave Libya until all of the country was liberated. And I intended to keep my word, and that's what I did. Unfortunately, the men that I was captured with, we thought they might still be in prison, in Sirte or somewhere. Two of the three, their bodies were found in a mass grave in Bin Jawad a few months after the war ended, and the other one, he's still missing, presumed dead.
Oh, I'm sorry. As I say, it's a dread. To see what these dictatorships do is simply dreadful. I think many of us can see why you would join such a fight for freedom, but seeing what such regimes can do.
Right. Well, I had seen through my years, I had spent years in the region in North Africa and the Middle East before the war, seeing how the regimes act, sometimes having my own run-ins with them, making friends who would tell me stories about their own imprisonment by the regimes for no reason at all. So it had made an impact on me over the years, and then also what I saw during the war and what I've seen in Syria continues to make an impact on my beliefs.
Of course. I've also heard in some places that there are some people in those populations who have backed the leadership. I mean, for various reasons, whether it be some sort of interest in the regime, or maybe a genuine belief in what the regime says. Have you met any such people? Have you ever talked to any pro-Assad civilians or pro-Gaddafi civilians or fighters?
I've met pro-Gaddafi civilians. Pro-Assad civilians, I haven't spoken to them. No. The pro-Gaddafi civilians have a variety of reasons for supporting the regime, but no, pro-Assad civilians I haven't encountered. People in Syria are very quiet and secretive about their affiliations. They don't most of them don't want their faces on camera. They're not very outspoken. And again, in Libya, it wasn't particularly popular to be pro-Gaddafi. Very few people were brave enough to express that opinion.
Yeah. So from your point of view, the general consensus among both civilian populations was that the regime was generally rather unpopular in comparison to the forces that were fighting against it.
In the circles I travel in, yes. I mean, it obviously depends on where you are. In Syria, there's more support for Assad than there ever was for Gaddafi, which is a bit disturbing. But again, they're not very open with me, the people who support Assad.
Of course. And, what was I about to say? Comparing the pro-Gaddafi forces and the pro-Assad forces, which would you say were the ones that were more unscrupulous or brutal, or were they both essentially tarred with the same brush?
No, the pro-Assad forces are unbelievably barbaric. I mean, they're medieval. It's shocking the level of torture and the things that they do and the things that they do openly. In Libya, we didn't really have cases of Gaddafi people raping children, for example. In Syria, that happens. Pro-Assad people rape children. They do all sorts of horrible things. They even record it sometimes and release it. The level of barbarity in Syria dwarfs the level of barbarity in Libya. And Libya was quite bad.
Oh, yes, it's confirmed many of my suspicions. I've heard that Gaddafi's forces did pale in comparison to the atrocities that Assad's forces have committed. But regarding your treatment, do you think that you were treated maybe spared in a sense any such brutal treatment by Gaddafi's forces on the grounds that you were maybe a foreign civilian and there couldn't be repercussions for such treatment, or did you get the sense that they maybe didn't care who you were, but as long as you were a rebel prisoner?
No, I mean, I was treated as a high profile, high value prisoner. The guards did not know who I was or even that I was an American. I was kept in secluded parts of the prison. They were probably given orders to treat me, humanely. It was a state secret that I was even alive. The regime denied having me in custody for almost the entire time I was in prison. They wanted the world to think I was dead. I was treated as somebody who the regime thought maybe there would be some value in me as a trade in the future. They knew that they had something unusual, considering that I was captured as an American fighter in Libya. They weren't exactly sure what to make of me. They suspected I was CIA or Mossad, but as far as why they didn't use me, that's the mystery I cannot figure out to this day. My best assumption is that given the lack of organization and poor governance of the regimes in general, and especially as they start to fracture, after a while, I got lost in the system, and whoever was supposed to have used me sort of forgot about me. But I'll never know. I mean, maybe Abdullah Sanusi knows, maybe Musa Ibrahim knows. I don't know. They'll have to ask these people. But so far as I know, no documents have been found about my case. It's sort of a mystery about what happened. Somehow I was spared.
And one thing we'll never know, of course, is whether Gaddafi knew or not. And regarding Gaddafi, what was your first reaction upon hearing the news that he had been killed by rebel forces, albeit in a rather brutal manner? Because there was much criticism around the world of the way he was treated, despite his various crimes. What were your first feelings on hearing about Gaddafi's rather sticky demise?
I mean, I was glad that the war was over. Personally, that's not how I would have dealt with Gaddafi, but at the same time, it's not my position to criticize anybody. It's not the world's business to criticize how he was treated, really. I mean, what happened to Gaddafi is what he did to the Libyan people for 42 years. Like, literally and metaphorically. What happened to him is what he had been doing to those people for 42 years, and they were understandably angry. And that's what happened. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, and he died by the sword. And I don't think anybody should be shedding any tears for Gaddafi.
Precisely. But of course, unfortunately, there are many foreigners abroad who seem to somehow see Gaddafi as a hero. And one thing I've noticed is that none of them are Libyan. Coincidentally, I wonder why. And so, what's your reaction when you see and hear people on some media sources rubbishing these people's accounts of freedom on the grounds that Gaddafi was allegedly some kind of hero?
I mean, these are bizarre beliefs that people hold. A lot of them are extremely far leftists who believe that, imperialism occurs and that there's a conspiracy behind every door. Some of these people, their hatred of the Western world, of America, of Europe is so deep that they align themselves with horrible dictators because they think that anybody that opposes America is somebody that's good. And it's ridiculous behavior. They also like Gaddafi because he was a socialist. I mean, these people a lot of them I think are people, I encountered this sort of thinking when I was at the university. People usually go through this phase, perhaps when they're in college, when they become such radical leftists that they think this way, but usually they grow out of it. But some people don't grow out of it.
Some don't.
And I don't really give these people a lot of credibility. Mostly they're restricted to some wacko websites. They post things calling me a mercenary or Al-Qaeda or all sorts of ridiculous things. I don't think many people really care what they say or pay much attention to them. But if they really believe in this, then why don't they go and, come to Syria and we'll meet them on the battlefield and settle it that way.
Exactly. As I say, what you said, it confirms what I've believed for ages, that there are some closed-minded fools who genuinely seem to believe that anyone who pays lip service to giving the West a hard time is somehow inherently in the right. And of course, I'm at university now, so I know that what you say is true. There are people who have certain naive beliefs or go through a red phase in which they believe in all this pseudo-socialist nonsense. So, yes, I think that's very true, and some people do grow out of it, but unfortunately, I've talked to many of them, and many of them don't. So, what do you think that people should do in a sense to open their eyes? Because many of these people seem to just marginalise the evidence here.
I think they should go to Syria and see for themselves what's happening.
Exactly what I think. And linking back to Syria, when you were in Aleppo and various parts of Syria, you must have obviously, with the fighters, had contact with the civilian populace. I mean, what aside from thoughts on pro and anti-government, which I've discussed before, what were their general thoughts on how the situation was going to end? Were they pessimistic, optimistic, or?
They're generally quite pessimistic. And actually, my film, all the characters in my film, with the exception of one, are actually civilians. Only one is in the FSA. They're quite pessimistic. They're quite depressed. This revolution's very different than Libya. Libya was, most people were cheerleaders of the revolution. There was a lot of anti-Gaddafi graffiti, caricatures of him painted on walls, people flying flags, people with posters of martyrs. People wanted to be on film. People wanted to talk. In Syria, people don't want their faces on film. They don't want to talk. They're afraid of the regime. There's not a lot of flags. There's not a lot of propaganda. Part of it's because in Aleppo, quite a few of them are pro-Assad, but it's a totally different feel of revolution, and it was depressing when I first got there, and I suppose it still is a bit depressing. It's very, very different. Civilians, they've been through a lot. They're still going to go through a lot. They're tired. They're worn out. But there's nothing they can do. The people are now fighting for their lives no matter what.
Yeah, I was reading that one Syrian said that 15% of people were for the government, 15% were against it, and the rest just wanted to get on with their lives and not have to go through pain and suffering and such like. How true would you to life would you say that is generally in Syria?
I couldn't put percentages on it, but it's the general assessment is probably accurate. A lot of people in any of these conflicts, you're going to have the majority of people just want to get back to their normal life. They're not diehard activists in either direction. They're just people who want to keep their heads down and try to survive it and get through it. And that's understandable.
I believe that most people, when it comes down to it, will care more about their family's well-being and where the next meal's going to be on the table than what checkpoint was attacked by whom and how the battle's going in a certain city, for example, and whether they're going to be well or not.
Right, and you can't blame them for that.
Oh, of course not. To think that way is to be human. I mean, the world would be in a pretty bad way if people didn't put their families first before military, ideological, and political concerns.
Right. I mean, it distresses me when I see young men of military age not participating in the revolution, when I see them in cafes, when I see them just going about life as usual, or even trying to make money off the revolution. It bothers me, but it's not my place to judge them, because not everybody's made to do this, not everybody's cut out for it, and although they need to be up there helping their country, if they're not, it's their decision. Freedom's what I'm fighting for, and freedom to stand by and do nothing while your neighbors get killed is a freedom that they have the right to do, if that's what they choose.
Unfortunately, it is a perverse freedom, yes, because freedom means freedom of choice, and even if it's a rather unsavoury choice, you're quite right. We have to tolerate it, or it isn't really democracy in a sense. I think you're quite right on that issue.
Right.
The media has often recently, over the last few months, portrayed the FSA as being inexperienced and disorganised compared to Assad's forces and unable to contend with his superior firepower, such as his air force. However, a lot of times recently we've seen news suggesting that they've been able to successfully down fighter jets and destroy many tanks and so on. So would you say that from your experience, that their competence has increased over time as they've gained more momentum in recent months?
Well, they're going to gain experience as time goes on. How it's very difficult. How experienced they are, they're still not at a level comparable to Assad's forces. They're still outgunned. They don't have the experience that they really need. More importantly, they lack a lot of the leadership that they need, the leadership and organization that will allow them to be much more effective on the battlefield. And that's the biggest deficit that they have is leadership, in addition to equipment. I mean, with bullets costing $2 a piece for a Kalashnikov, and shortages and lack of heavy weapons, they're at a serious disadvantage. The advantage that they have, though, is that, it's harder for Assad to resupply his forces when they're far away from the capital. They have the advantage of urban terrain in the city. So they're holding their own, but, by the numbers, they're outnumbered. They're outgunned. It's quite difficult. But their skills are slowly improving. They will improve over time, but they're not going to reach the point where, they're a highly skilled fighting force, most likely during this war.
It's frequently said that the majority of the fighters are relatively poor conscript soldiers, with the rest being civilian rebels and a minority being foreign fighters. Do you think that that accurately sums up the composition of the FSA?
Right. I mean, it's almost entirely citizen soldiers. Even those with some military experience don't have particularly good or useful military experience. And there are some foreign fighters mixed in. But it's a lot like Libya, where these are guys who one day they're driving a taxi cab, the next day they're on the front line with a gun. And it's a steep learning curve, but they learn quick, and what they lack in skill they make up for in heart.
Many common soldiers on Assad's side are actually against him, but lack the willpower or maybe opportunity to defect, because their families are essentially at risk if they try and leave Assad's army without permission. So would you say that's quite an accurate statement?
Yes, a lot of Assad's people do not fight particularly hard. Yeah, I mean, I've met people who have defected. Some defect, they join the FSA, some defect and they go to Turkey. His loyalty, especially when the Sunni is serving for him, is not particularly high, which explains why he's making certain strategic decisions that he's making.
And sometimes we've been hearing a lot of media traffic suggesting that Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the USA have been arming the rebels. But on the other hand, I and several others have been led to understand that actually the USA, and by the media, has been withholding weapons from the Syrian rebels and trying to hamper their transfer on the grounds of concerns about Islamist fighters. Since you were there, were there a lot of weapons getting through from abroad, or was it more an intermittent trickle of weapons?
There are not a lot of weapons coming in. Rebels complain to me they get no help from the United States or Europe. I don't know if any efforts are made to restrict the flow of weapons, but there's definitely not enough weapons coming in. I see no evidence of American European help. I had a commander show me what he uses for intel. He had Google Earth maps printed and taped together with Scotch tape, using images that may have been a few years old of the terrain. I mean, if the U.S. or Europe were helping, he'd probably have updated satellite imagery that actually shows the location of Assad's forces. But instead he has a pathetic Google Earth printout taped together. It was quite sad. And later that day, I was in that battle area, and a guy got shot in the head by a sniper right near us. They don't have intel, they don't get the weapons, they don't get the support. They get some money from somewhere that they use to buy weapons. But the arms market is very inflated. Bullets are $2 each for Kalashnikovs. For a Dushka, which is the weapon I use most in Libya, it's about $12 a bullet. For a fully automatic weapon that you go through about 50 rounds in maybe 10 or 15 seconds. So that could be $600. It's very hard to fight a war like this. RPG grenades are between $500 and $1,000, depending on the type of grenade. They're not getting the support they need to be able to win the war.
And regarding such a lack of support, it has been said that the lack of support is actually feeding the radical fighters what they want, because it has been reported that some people are increasingly willing to turn to the radical forces, such as the Al-Nusra Front, in sheer desperation that no one else is giving them any substantial help. So would you say that's a fairly accurate analysis?
This is absolutely true. Al-Nusra Front has the best reputation as fighters. They capture Assad bases and acquire more weapons, have funding. There's fighters who I know are joining Al-Nusra, pretending that they believe in the ideology of Al-Nusra, but actually don't. When they're with Al-Nusra and they're not allowed to smoke and everything, they act all serious, but then when they get away from Al-Nusra, they go back with their friends, smoke a cigarette, and laugh about it. So when you look at the numbers joining Al-Nusra, quite a few of them, I believe, are just faking it because they want weapons and ammunition. They want to fight. They want to serve the Syrian people, but they can't do that with the FSA because the FSA lacks the weapons and ammunition, or they're asked to spend their own money, and they can't. A soldier might go through $50, $100 a day of ammunition. They don't have that kind of, Syria's not a wealthy country. People don't have that kind of money. So they turn to al-Nusra to get what they need.
I think one fighter described the al-Nusra Front and other such extremists as like Aleppo Special Forces, because they're bringing in weapons, experience and dedication, and they're essentially bringing in everything that the West has not been giving the rebel fighters, which they need to defeat Assad. So would you also say that's a perfectly correct analysis?
Yes, I mean they're not anything like a special forces or trained fighting force, but they are the guys that fight hard, partly because they don't really fear death, because they don't mind martyrdom. Their reputation's very good for continuing to advance when others flee. They have a lot of respect. Even people who don't like them respect them. At the same time, I believe that the FSA is going to fight them after the revolution. If al-Nusra doesn't leave, the FSA will fight them. I've heard fighters express the belief that once the war is over, there'll be another war to get rid of al-Nusra. And I believe they'll follow through on it. But the growing importance of al-Nusra is all the more reason why the United States and Europe need to act quickly to supply moderate separatist FSA units with what they need to win this war. Because right now the heroes of this revolution are al-Nusra. And that's a terrible situation. And I've had some interaction with them. They were partly responsible for guarding the building I was in for a month. But these are not guys that you want to be the heroes of your revolution. And not after the revolution either. You don't want them around. So, this is a problem created by the U.S. and Europe not supplying rebels. If you control the flow of weapons and ammunition, you control the revolution. And the U.S. and Europe need to exert some control very quickly to get control of this revolution and supply the units that they want supplied to get this job done.
Yeah, it does confirm what many of us have been thinking, that the US's policy of starving the rebels of weapons on the grounds of that there's a minority of Islamists it's actually creating more Islamist issues than it is preventing them, because it's starving the fighters who need the weapons the most, and it's playing into the hands of the al-Nusra Front and other jihadi. Would you also agree with?
Yes, that's absolutely true. It's absolutely true, and it's something that was obvious several months ago. And it just, it's inexplicable that the U.S. and Europe are allowing this to happen.
And we've also heard some FSA critics and have used this against them, that sometimes the FSA and the al-Nusra Front cooperate on operations together, such as one attack on a police station in Aleppo. Would you say that this generally applies across the country, or is this mainly an occasional alliance of expediency when a common enemy needs to be defeated?
I don't know. I don't know what command decisions they've made, but I do know that Syrians say they appreciate al-Nusra even if they don't like them, because they're the only ones helping them. They say even if Israel came and helped them, they'd say thank you to Israel at this point. They're desperate. They'll take any help they can get. And if al-Nusra or al-Qaeda is helping them, they're going to accept it because nobody else is helping them. This is what Syrians told me. So, if they need to cooperate with them to win the war, they'll do it. And it's totally understandable. As long as they shoot in the right direction, who really cares who they are, why they're fighting, as long as they're fighting on the same side as you. Any differences you have with them, you sort out after the regime falls. And that's the attitude of the FSA.
Many people who have been on the side of intervention in Syria have suggested options such as maybe a no-fly zone would be appropriate help. Do you think a no-fly zone would actually be decisive in defeating Assad in terms of eliminating his air force, or do you think it would do more harm than good?
I think it would be a decisive blow, and not so much because of the no-fly zone actually destroying aircraft and the ground targets as well, but because it would signal to Syrians that the world had made a commitment to the fall of the regime. A lot of people are sitting on the fence now, waiting. They're unsure. They don't want to get involved in the revolution because Assad, at this point, could very well win. But if there was a commitment made by the outside that signaled to them that this regime was going to fall, a lot more people would join the FSA. And a lot of civilians would switch their support to the FSA. And that would make a huge, huge difference. Just like in Libya. When I joined the Libyan revolution, there weren't that many of us going to the front line. I'd see a lot of young guys in Benghazi just sitting there drinking coffee, waiting for Gaddafi to come destroy us. But after NATO got involved, everybody wanted to be a revolutionary then. And it would be the same way in Syria.
I talked to one Syrian in particular, and he said that because the opposition had no coherent leadership, and he was unsure of what a post-Assad Syria would be like, he said, and I quote, "I think our best bet is Bashar al-Assad." Do you think that that's a common opinion, that people are supporting Assad maybe sometimes not out of any loyalty to him, but out of concern for what a post-Assad Syria might be like, and out of concern that the opposition aren't a viable choice?
It's certainly possible. I mean, that they believe that. You know, the problem is these sorts of arguments were things that could have been had sitting around a table before the revolution started. At this point, this revolution is unstoppable. The regime will fall, whether it takes 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years, is up to what help comes from the outside. And the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get. People are fighting for their lives now. They're not going to turn back. Even people who are questioning the revolution know that they're in this to fight for their lives now. There's no going back. So these sorts of arguments about there's not a capable leadership, there's not any power in place for a transition afterwards, these are academic arguments that are irrelevant at this point, because it's going to happen. And withholding support because you don't like the leadership, or not everything's perfect, I mean, that's not an excuse for allowing things to further deteriorate.
Of course not. And regarding the Syrian National Council, and how much authority do you think they have over the forces on the ground? Because I know you said that the FSA lacks structured leadership as such. Do you think the SNC and the FSA command, such as Riyad al-Assad, do you think they exert any significant influence over the battalions on the ground, or is it more dependent on circumstance?
No, I don't think they exert much influence. Orders that are issued at the top don't always make it down to individual units. Units feel like, you know, if they're getting a steady supply of weapons and ammunition, they're more likely to accept orders and directives from higher up. But a lot of Katibas receive virtually nothing. So, I mean, there's not that much control over them. It's sort of a voluntary acceptance of orders and things like that. You know, there's just a lack of leadership. A lot of leaders are not respected also, which is a problem. And they haven't earned the respect. And a lot of them stay outside of, far, far away from the actual front lines. And people know this, and some of the leaders are mocked. And that the lack of leadership is really the greatest sin of the revolution so far, is that people are leading who should not be leaders. And looking at them and interacting with some of them, I can understand why the West is hesitant to give them weapons and ammunition, just interacting with some of the leaders. But at the same time, that's not a reason to abandon the people under them, because it's not their fault that their leader is incompetent.
But what do you think the leaders? What do you think leaders should do to earn more respect? Should maybe be travelling more to the front line, meeting more with the common fighter, or issuing more militarily competent orders and so on? Do you think they should be doing things such as that to maybe earn some respect for their orders and so on?
I mean, there are leaders in the FSA who are very good. I'm not saying which ones are good and which ones are not good. But there are some that are very good and that are respected, and there's some who are not respected. And they need to remove the ones that are not respected and who are not capable. They need to spend more time in Syria. They need to spend more time closer to the front line. They have to be visible to the men. They have to find leaders who can inspire people more than anything. They don't need bureaucrats and technocrats. They need inspirational leaders, men who can give a speech, men who have been on the front line and people have seen them and whose reputation precedes them. You know, they need inspiring people who will be respected, not people who are chosen for other reasons, for family connections or because they know the right people. They don't need to be playing these little political games off the front line. You know, they need competent leaders who the men respect and who will follow.
And regarding such leaders, how are FSA leaders chosen? Do they somehow elect themselves, or are they chosen by the soldiers by a general consensus, or is it somehow chosen from the top?
I don't know how the higher levels of leadership are chosen. I know that katibas are created sometimes by men who just have the money or have the friends who have the money to start a katiba. So you end up with a katiba that has a leader with no military experience, which is fine. A lot of people don't have military experience. But men who are not particularly capable leaders. They just had the money to run a katiba. The problem is that in Syria, it's very expensive to run a katiba. Fuel is expensive. Ammunition is extremely expensive. So even your daily expenses are quite high for this war. And some of the katibas don't get funding really from the FSA. So a lot of people who, I call them vanity katibas. Some men start katibas as a vanity katiba. They want to play the role of military commander, and they do it. And it's sad because then they send men to the front line and get them killed. And this is a problem. This is a problem on the ground. So some of these katibas are led by men who should not be leading. But that's the nature of the war, and when you're not funding the war, when you're not supplying weapons and ammunition, these are the sorts of things that happen, and it's truly tragic.
So you think the key to maybe improving the competence of the FSA is maybe to weed out the technocrats and bureaucrats, and to have more militarily competent popular men in the local leadership and possibly the higher.
Oh, this is what I believe. I mean, you have the leaders who will interact with the men and who will carry out the orders. They need to be more respected, more competent. Maybe you need some bureaucrats and technocrats to deal with the Americans and Europeans, if help ever comes. But, the men on the ground need to be inspirational leaders, right? Well, what they don't have in the FSA is training, weapons, and ammunition, but what they have is heart and motivation. And you can increase that dramatically if they see that they're following men who deserve to be followed.
Of course, and there have been reports, obviously, of some Syrian rebel war crimes, even though the majority of the atrocities are committed by the opposition. Even the Russian government has admitted as such. But often in places such as Homs, I've heard of some ethnic cleansing by the rebels of Christian neighbourhoods, and I've heard that there have been some sectarian chants and other such things. How prevalent is sectarianism in the war, both from the from the pro-Assad perspective and from the revolutionary perspective?
I don't know any other than these stories. I don't know. I haven't witnessed it. But sectarian conflict will be a problem that's going to be more of a problem the longer the war continues. This region is very much into an eye for an eye and retaliation type mentality. So the longer it goes on, the more of a problem this will be. We might be past the point of no return on this issue where, Alawites, most of them might flee the country after the war, and those who remain might be killed. I don't know. From the rebels I talk to, they say, they don't want any retaliation against Alawites Christians. They want everybody to live in peace. But knowing what happened in Lebanon during their war, with my experience in the region, I think this will be a problem, but I mean, there's not a whole lot that can be done about it except end the war as quickly as possible before it gets out of control. Regarding
the Syrian army itself, the degradation of the army is key to the defeat of Assad and the ending of the war. There have been various claims that it's in trouble. I mean, Mustafa al-Sheikh, who was a high-level defector, he incorrectly predicted that the army would collapse in February of this year, which obviously didn't take place. How much trouble, logistically, supply-wise, and troop levels-wise, do you think the Syrian army is actually in terms of dealing with the rebels, and how close do you think it could be to defeat if the situation carries on?
From what I've seen, it looks like the Syrian army is fighting the rebels with their B team, not even their A team. He's kept his best equipment, his best men in reserve. This might be because he fears outside intervention or Turkish troops or something, but he's holding back. Assad's holding back. This is a war that the longer he allows it to continue, the more the status quo becomes in the international community that Syria is a broken country. That's just the way it is. 2 years of war. There won't be any impetus to really fix it. There won't be any sense of urgency anymore. So the way he's doing things, he's actually doing a winning strategy at this point. Now, as far as, his army, the army is not going to collapse anytime soon. He's holding territory okay. He mostly wants to preserve the corridor from Damascus to Latakia, but, whether he's still holding Aleppo, I think at some point he might let Aleppo go. It looks like he's letting some of the bases up north he's letting them go rather than hold on to them. He should be able to resupply them better than he is. He should be able to reinforce them better, but he's not. I think he's making strategic decisions here to just let some areas be and focus on making sure he doesn't lose key parts of the country. But, there's been a lot of predictions that the regime will collapse. People were tweeting to me on Twitter, not as if that's a good source at all, but that, by the time I get over there, the war will be over. And of course not. This war could go on for years. These predictions are almost laughable. I don't know if they make them for propaganda or what, but this war will take a very long time. Libya took 8 months with NATO's help in a country where there weren't nearly as many towns and cities to take, and where the Gaddafi's army was far smaller than Assad's. This war could go on for a very long time.
Since you believe that the Syrian army is by no means in any sort of serious trouble, and since there's been a lot of talk of possible use of chemical weapons being prepared for use, do you believe that if the regime starts to lose any serious ground and starts being seriously compromised, that it could resort to chemical weapon use, as much of the media is alleging?
I think the regime would never use chemical weapons because they know that that's regime suicide. They know that that's a trigger for international intervention. Well, when I think chemical weapons could be used is that the commanders in charge of chemical weapons are Alawi, and they may disobey regime orders as the regime starts to fracture. A lot of Alawi feel that they're fighting for their very survival as a people, and some of the commanders may use chemical weapons in a last-ditch attempt to save themselves. But if there are chemical weapons being mixed, prepared, as has been reported in the press lately, which there's conflicting reports. It may not even be true. I believe the regime will be doing it as a deterrent to outside intervention. It would be very hard for Turkey, for example, to explain to its people how they just lost a few thousand Turkish troops to chemical weapons attack by crossing the border into Syria, for example.
So do you believe that if chemical weapons are used, then it will likely be down to local Alawite commanders as opposed to a direct order from President Assad at the top?
Right. I believe the regime will maintain the order not to use them. Some commanders might disobey the order if the regime starts to truly collapse and fracture. It would be suicide for the regime to authorize use of chemical weapons. And it's not nearly at that point. Like I said, the regime appears to be using its B team fighting the rebels. They haven't even used their best equipment, their best stuff yet. So there's no urgency for them to be anywhere near the point where they would even consider using chemical weapons.
Mr. Assad, do you think he's currently still confident, as some are reporting, that he can win the war and he's going to carry on using all military options necessary to try to crush the rebellion instead of considering any political alternative?
He probably wants to leave. His wife is probably giving him a really hard time because she really liked being popular at dinner parties before. But he can't leave because his Alawite circle around him would kill him if he tried to leave. He might even, in a way, be hostage to his own inner circle. If he came a time he tried to leave, they would probably kill him rather than let him leave. I think that he would like to take exile at some point, but, I think his strategy is he wants to declare victory and then leave. And, I suspect perhaps this is why the U.S. and Europe did not support the rebels early on, because they thought that if Assad can get to the point where he can declare a victory and leave, that, a fake democracy could emerge, fake elections. The U.S. and Europe can say that they averted a humanitarian crisis and they made the right call by not supplying the rebels with weapons, and they would essentially sell out the Syrian people. This is what I fear was the thinking until very recently, when the rebels continued to make gains even without Western support. But, whether Assad will stay and fight to the end, I don't know. I don't think that he is a particularly brave man. I think he's a coward. It's not clear if he ever even really wanted to be president of Syria in the first place. But, he's going to continue fighting.
What you said definitely sounds feasible, because I have heard the possibility that Mr. Assad could be assassinated if he tries to leave, because his Alawite circle will essentially prevent him from leaving, because their loyalty would obviously only go to a certain degree. They've got their own interests to think of, and I do think that it'll probably have pressure from his family, of course, to leave, including his formerly popular wife. But as you said, he maybe doesn't know how to leave, without compromising his family and himself. He apparently, you're right, he apparently didn't want to be president, and apparently tried to refuse the offer. So I don't think he's the kind of person who would fight to the end, unless he was maybe pressured to do so by his own ruling clique. Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
Yes. He comes across as not a particularly strong man. The people around him, a lot of them are fighting because they think that it's the survival of Alawites. It's the survival of themselves and survival of their benefits that they've gotten for years from the regime. I don't think it's so much about the man. Assad's not a particularly inspiring figure. Now, having said that, there are a lot who have been duped who apparently are very loyal to the man. I'm not sure his loyalty to them is quite as high. I do think he would, if given the opportunity, he would try to get out.
It has been said that, linking back to the horrendous Hula massacre some time ago, that he could try and carve out an Alawite rump state from the Turkey region, which may be why he was trying to drive Sunni families out from the region. Do you think that such an attempt would be feasible if he lost the greater mass of the country? He could maybe try and retreat to the Alawite mountainous regions and attempt to carve out, in a sense, a rump Syrian state which he could easily defend.
Yeah, I believe that's part of his thinking. I think that, when Aleppo is eventually liberated, what he's really playing for now is Damascus, Hama, Homs, and Latakia. He's playing to keep this corridor, keep this region. He knows if he loses Damascus, he loses the country. But he wants to keep, this is really what he's trying to hold. It's not, I think he's realized he's going to lose Aleppo. He just wants to destroy it as much as possible first. But whether he wants to hold this part, he wants a divided Syria. If that's the best he can get, he'll take it, and he'll try to carve out a Syria within a Syria.
Unfortunately, it does seem to be the case that people his method of divide and rule does seem to have worked in some regions. I mean, from what you've said, and I think from what I've seen, the majority of the Syrian people would reject sectarianism and would like to embrace a Syria for all Syrians. But unfortunately, I do think that with some people, they have seemed to have fallen victim to the sectarian trap, which is what he's trying to weave in which people see each other as enemies depending on ethnicity and support and so on.
Right. Well, some Alawis, apparently their parents tell them when they're young that one day Sunnis will try to kill them. So there's sort of this mentality of persecution that, they're 12% of the population. So they're 2 million people, give or take. They haven't yet really begun to fight. When the regime starts to fracture, these people are going to fight for their survival. And that's a group in reserve that hasn't really been counted. That will come to support the regime if it becomes necessary. If they feel that like their survival's threatened, that's a large recruitment base for Assad to still draw from. That's why this war could go on for a long time.
So to conclude, do you think that he's preserving his main strong military forces and he's holding back his Alawi support base in case he needs to recruit them en masse for like a last-ditch stand, so he's essentially preparing for a final showdown by reinforcing Damascus and the Alawite regions?
Probably. I mean, he realizes that, he's going to maintain the places that he's strong. He won't even have to recruit the Alawites. A lot of them will just come and join, enlist, they'll form militias. Like the Shabiha, that's just the start of that. So he knows he has a base to fall back on, and this could result in 2 Syrias. I think that the rebels will not stop and accept 2 Syrias. They want to liberate all of Syria. But there could be a time where 2 Syrias is what happens for quite a while during this war.
But as I said, let's hope that we can make that maybe a post-Assad Syria will emerge in which people can reconcile and which it'll be a united country and sectarian wounds can be given time to heal.
I certainly hope so. But the longer this war goes on, the less likely that becomes.
Let's hope for an end to it fairly soon. Then I don't think what would happen if it went on any longer.
Yeah, I mean, it's in everyone's interest that this war ends as quickly as possible with a FSA victory. Even people who support the regime, it's in their interest as well that at this point, given that it's unstoppable, that it ends as quickly as possible.
Precisely. Thanks for the interview, by the way. It's been very informative. It's been brilliant to have you on with us. We'll be posting it to our definitely be posting it to our website at some point in the future.
Thank you. Anytime.
It's been brilliant. It's been much of an experience for me as it will for the listener. I've learned quite a lot. It's been quite an eye opener to many different Syrian issues, despite the fact that I already knew a fair bit about it myself earlier on. So thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.